Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. This is the final episode of 2023. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, depending on when you're listening to this. But if you're listening to this on release, this is Christmas Day if you happen to celebrate. And in doing so, I am reviewing the last of the DCEU films, Aquaman and the Last Kingdom, and I am joined by my good friend, one of the film realists, Chris Pagonis. Hello.
Hey ho, or
Ho
ho
ho?
ho ho.
Ho ho ho.
I don't
I
know
don't
what we're
know.
going with.
That's fine. All right, so it is a jam-packed episode. This has been a long time coming. It's been requested that I do a tier list of all of the DCEU. So because of what we're recording this on, Chris cannot see the actual Actually, wait, you're on a computer. I'll post the link in here and you can view it as I edit it. So you should have it there in the chat. It's always a work in progress, everybody. So it is for the tier list. You will eventually see this in some form of image, or there will be a video clip completely truncating the video down. The tier list is S, A, B, C, D, F. And whenever I do these, I am compartmentalizing the franchise or universe in its own tier list. This isn't comparing it to other properties of any kind. It's all within this, and this is my tier list. Chris is obviously going to react. That's why he's here for this. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to review Aquaman The Lost Kingdom in a non-spoiler section, and then in spoilers. No worries, there of course will be time codes listed in the description. And then to round the show out, I have a brief idea of what I'm going to be doing in the new year, but that's not set in stone. So without further ado, let's get into the official film realist DCEU tier list.
The time has come. Take up your mother's trident.
So we're going to be going chronologically starting with the very first film again, and I'm looking forward to how Chris is going to react to how I'm listing this, because this is half the fun. And so the first film in the universe is Man of Steel. I think it does everything this universe did well. And so from the get-go, I'm putting Man of Steel in S. Again, this is the DCEU tier list. All of the other stuff is going to be on its own thing. And so as somebody who is, as we're recording this, wearing a Zack Snyder toque, I don't think that the DCEU, for the most part, ever did anything better. So with that, I'm also going to say that I think Batman vs. Superman, the Ultimate Edition, the director's cut for this is especially important because the theatrical release cut all of the important information out. I'm also going to put that in S. The next film was Suicide Squad, which was absolutely brutalized in the edit. And this is what happens when you write a script in 5 minutes. I feel bad for everybody involved because I think there was a lot of excitement for what this film could be. But ultimately, David Ayer was not allowed really to make the film he wanted to because of the fan reception to the two previous installments. And I don't think the Suicide is very good, but I don't think it's the worst the universe has had to offer so far. So I'm going to put it in D. That's where I'm going to put Suicide Squad. The next is arguably the best film amongst, I would say, mass fans and audiences, which was 2017's Wonder Woman, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I know Chris really hates the third act.
It's two movies put into one. That's my problem. It's two.
But
fine. Yeah.
even said, I'm going to put Wonder Woman in A.
A. Wow. All right.
I'm going to put it in A. So I think it's safe to say that I think the earliest films in the franchise are probably the best it ever was. And so the next film is the theatrical cut of Justice League, or the Justice cut F. Like there's nothing needs to be said about Justice League. It's not great. It's not good. Anything you like from it, we'll talk about in a later installment in this universe. The next was Aquaman, the only film in the entire universe to gross over $1 billion. That number was the magic number for Warner Brothers, allegedly. It's some of the massive changes in the universe because Batman versus Superman did not make a billion. Allegedly, it's pretty much been confirmed, but that's neither here nor there. I think Aquaman is fine. It's the funnest version of Jason Momoa as that character. I don't think it's great. It's a popcorn flick that these films really weren't going for. So with that, I'm going to put it in C. Next installment was Shazam. I really like Shazam. I think the
The first
elements of
one.
was
Yeah.
big and Superman. I think it works really well. I wasn't a huge fan of immediately going straight to the Shazam family. It's fun in the conclusion, but overall, I think Zachary Levi was a great Shazam. My brain just went to mush what the name. I want to say it's Asher Angel is his name. It is Asher Angel. Wow, I pulled that out of nowhere. I'm going to put Shazam also an A. I really like it. I think it perfectly captures that level of scary and Amblin nature that it was really going for. Like outside of modern effects, it
I'll agree
easily
with you
could have
that
been.
it was fun
Yeah.
and it was what more of the DC movies needed to be.
Yeah, well, certainly it successfully managed to balance a tone that none of them have done since then. Birds of Prey and the fabulous what is it? I have to zoom in on this. And the fabulous emancipation of one
Emancipation.
Harley Quinn. I really like this film. It is, as you said earlier, it is a bunch of different movies all in one, but the ensemble was great. The conclusion's not necessarily one of my favorites in the universe, but having Obi-Wan Kenobi as Black Mask was super entertaining, and just in terms of exploring the grittier aspects of the Gotham universe that we had been given, I'm going to put it in B. I think getting more Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn is always something to enjoy.
I think if you
Okay.
name that movie differently, if it wasn't called Birds of Prey, it would be a higher movie. It would have grossed higher. It would have
It's true.
been
Well, they did
much.
change the title to,
Yeah.
I think, just like Birds of Prey Harley, like it changed multiple times in its run.
Yeah.
So next is much maligned, and that is Wonder Woman 84, released during the pandemic. It is a throwback to the Donner era of Superman films. It's a mess. There are elements I like about it. I think the biggest issue I have is being in the 80s just because the decade has become so popular with nostalgia, Stranger Things amongst that. While I don't love it, I don't think it's the worst this universe has had to offer. So I feel similarly about it as I do with Suicide Squad. There are elements I like, but it is nowhere near what that character is capable of doing. And having Steve Trevor come back just because
Yeah.
I thought was really disappointing. And looking at the career Pedro Pascal has had since then, it's a waste of Pedro Pascal. Next is Zack Snyder's Justice League. It's A for me. It's the version of the movie you wanted. It is absolutely way too long. That's fine. But in terms of it being the epic conclusion to Zack's run in the universe, if you did like the versions of the characters you got, which I did, getting to see Darkseid and really explore Ray Fisher's cyborg character, who was completely cut out of the theatrical cut. I really enjoy this, and there's parts of it that I thoroughly enjoy going to. Specifically, the best time travel from The Flash, which we'll get to later. Do you have anything to say about Zack Snyder's Justice League?
I prefer not to say stuff about sex. You know how I feel about epic movies. I'm not the
That's true.
biggest fan of epic movies, so when this
Mhm.
came out, I know that you were all about it, and it wasn't for me. I don't get me wrong, I do not like Joss's version,
Mhm.
but this didn't do for me what it does for some people.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it just loses me in that. If you're going to do an epic, you need to be doing a little more for me, and this
I
just
think that's
wasn't it.
fair. Sure. Next is the now Kevin Feige of the DC universe. That is The Suicide Squad. I think this film is good. There are certain elements that I know we saw this together that James Gunn, I would say, leans in more so for this that you could argue are crutches of his films. Specifically for me, the soundtrack use does not work very well. I think it's fun. I like seeing Starro and the ridiculousness of the universe. I'm gonna put it in B. It's certainly better than Aquaman, continuing the trajectory of where the DC universe goes. Not super a fan of or the DCE universe, but I would I'd be crazy to say it's worse than some of the other films in here. So next is, I know I'm in the minority for this. I don't think this is the only television series of the DCEU, and it makes the lead character or in a supporting character from Suicide Squad a now lead character, and I enjoyed the wackiness of it, but ultimately I just don't think it works. I know I'm in the minority with this, and that's okay, but it's Peacemaker. I'm going to put that in C. I like getting ground level stories in the superhero universes, but this was not one that worked for me. If it did for you, I know that that's a positive, but other than that, it's fine. It's not great. So for that, for
See, I'll
it's
agree with you there. I find it too one note. Like
mhm,
it just is. It works for an episode. It doesn't work for a whole season for me, and I don't think that the series works that well.
no. The next is the hierarchy of power in the DC universe was never going to be the same. In that we got Henry Cavill back for 5 seconds, and then oh, just kidding, he's not Superman anymore. That's Black Adam. I think Black Adam is, unfortunately, if you had given me a movie where we really got to explore The Rock playing a bad guy again, the best performance out of The Rock, I would say, in my personal opinion, I think you would agree with me on this, Chris, is when he was Hobbs the first time in Fast Five.
Yeah,
Like truly being an
absolutely.
antagonist.
Yeah,
And this to me just it's an indicator of DC being completely rudderless at the time, which is you had Shazam. I'm okay with Black Adam even having his own movie. Have him go like defeat the Justice Society and tease an eventual fight with his actual nemesis in Shazam. And I do not like this movie. The fact that it didn't understand how Dr. Fate's powers work absolutely drove me insane. It's for me, there are elements that are fun. I like getting to see characters from the Justice Society. Hawkman was great, played by Aldous Hodge, but Tornado and Atom Smasher are in a CW show. It's a D. It's just it's a nothing. It has nothing I want to revisit. It uses Paint It Black, which is honestly kind of comical now. And so I'm going to put it there. The next, ironically, is the sequel to Shazam, which doesn't work. Unfortunately, I think there are some interesting elements. Continuing to explore the realm of the Greek gods is something that you can do with that mysticism element of Shazam. But ultimately, I think it just fails to do anything that the first one did successfully. So I'm also going to put Shazam Fury of the Gods in D. Now, then the next release was The Flash, and The Flash is a complete mixed bag of a lot of bad and a lot of good. I recently had a conversation with one of the listeners on Twitter, Jermaine, which is the actual Barry storyline I think is great. The problem is the movie doesn't make that the absolute focus. We were working with a multiverse story with what elements can we use. It's not Flashpoint, which would have been really exciting. It's not a true Flash film because we get elements from Man of Steel. We get Michael Shannon not wanting to be there at all. We don't get a fight with the Reverse Flash. I actually don't mind Dark Flash. I think it's an interesting reflection on Barry's constant need to solve something he feels responsible for. But and we get a Michael Keaton who's not canonically the Michael Keaton from the Burton universe. And we got Sasha Calle, who's not going to continue to be Sasha Calle. Not that I'm holding that against the film, but she's not given enough to do. And so because, and obviously without acknowledging it, Ezra Miller and their unfortunate issues that became quite public, the film is a complete mixed bag. I do like a lot of the Flash stuff, but then again, there's some really insane, terrible visuals. So I think I'm just kind of talking out loud. I like it more than anything in D, I think I'm gonna put it in C. I think that's fair. It's unfortunate that the Scarlet Speedster's first full theatrical outing as the lead wasn't a knockout success, but I give Andy Muschietti a lot of credit for jumping on a sinking ship and bailing out as much water as humanly possible. So and then we have a film I was very much looking forward to. Chris and I have this funny joke where I'm called Hollywood Nostradamus, and my prediction turned out to be accurate, which was Xolo Maridueña wound up playing Blue Beetle. I like this movie a lot. I think its simplicity really allows the characters to thrive. It being from what I've read, again, I would not be somebody who would have a ton of exposure to this, but its representation of the Latinx community, particularly in the way that all of the different family members interact, the use of their culture amongst a lot of gentrification, particularly in big cities, was quite accurate from what I've read. And Blue Beetle as a character, specifically with Jaime Reyes, is such a fun character. Him being a reluctant Iron Man Jr., for lack of better description, I think's a lot of fun. I'm really hoping we get to see more from the Blue Beetle universe, particularly with Ted Kord, who is the second Blue Beetle, who has a significant relationship with Booster Gold, who was announced to have a series in the DCEU. I really enjoyed Blue Beetle. I don't think it can be somewhere with the other A-tier films, but I certainly think it deserves to be in B among Suicide Squad and Birds of Prey. And I'm going to leave Aquaman for after the review, because that would kind of ruin the review. So I'm going to leave that there, and I will do a recap at the very end with everything listed in there. So that took 15 minutes. Let's get into Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom.
Perhaps you should leave and let someone who knows what they're doing be king.
So dramatic.
Okay, so they made a movie. It happens to star Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson, and this is the non-spoiler section, so we're not going to get into plot details. We're not going to say how much Amber Heard is actually in the movie. We saw this together and with my father, David Naranya, and he came up with a metaphor that you thought was a complete apt description of the movie, which was what again?
It summarized the movie very perfectly. So he stated that imagine you're at a pizza place and you get a large 16-slice pizza, but every single slice is different. And only one or two of those slices is any good.
Yeah. I came up with an analogy for this as we were watching it, which is it's Aquaman Deep World, which I'm comparing that to Thor the Dark World, where if you had bullet points for what happens without getting into specifics, I think it would look good as a story point. It's like this happens. Okay, great. That connects to boom, connects to this, connects to this. The issue that I have in particular with the movie is, one, there's not really any character arcs to speak of, which is abnormal because the bread and butter of these comic book characters is the simplicity in the arcs and the fact that there are essentially none in the movie. So you're just kind of watching. The metaphor that I thought of while watching this was like the Jungle Book, the animated film from 1967, which is for people who don't know, the original Jungle Book short stories were just Mowgli on a bunch of it. Rudyard Kipling was just on a bunch of adventures, and that's what this is. It's Aquaman does a thing, and then Aquaman does a new thing, and then Aquaman goes and does another thing. And one of the things that I found most disappointing, again, we're not going to talk into spoilers, is that we barely spend any time in the ocean, which, again, from a budget standpoint, neither of us is going to sit here and go, well, why isn't the whole... It's got to be so expensive to do that. But he's Aquaman, or he's the Mermaid Man, and there is no Barnacle Boy. But it is just everything thrown at the screen in its simplest fashion. And the visuals at times are fun. Patrick Wilson and Jason Momoa do have a great, I mean, it's technically, I don't know why I struggle with that. They are half brothers, but their relationship really does fit brothers from different families. And I think that's an element that they absolutely nailed, particularly with what was the result of the first film. But because of off-camera things, there's barely any scenes between Amber Heard and Jason Momoa. We get some good stuff with Tamora Morrison and Jason Momoa. But as I said, it's just kind of stuff happens. I think the only character that has a succinct story is Black Manta. Right?
Yeah,
Which you
that's the
see
only
in
one
the
they do, yeah.
trailers, right? He gets the Black Trident, he's on a mission. Okay, great. He's on a mission of revenge. So at least he has progression into what he wants to do. And that's just kind of it, right? Like we get to see in the trailers, again, we've seen this, like we revisit places that are, I think what bothers me most, and it's just come to me now, in terms of how this movie is structured, it is the same movie as the first one, but worse in every regard.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's random journey. Okay, we go here, we go here, we go here, and then we fight in the ocean. But it lacks any of the interesting stakes. And then, without getting into specifics again, the movie has the same kind of ending as Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where it's like moral message. You're like, and again, I'm not somebody who, and neither of us is going to complain about politics being a part of superheroes. They've always been there, but typically it's been addressed in a more mature and succinct fashion. And when somebody just stands on a soapbox at the end of the film or the television series, I'm like, well, that actually would have been a really interesting thing for somebody to explore. Like this guy of two worlds trying to be the king of one, and then maybe a superhero to the human. Oh no, we're not gonna. Oh, okay, we're not gonna do that at all. Chris, nobody can hear you shaking your head or nodding.
I'm just so baffled. Like, you're saying everything that needs to be said though, because it's just like what it was just such a mess, right? And the only thing that I can sort of add to it is just exposition, exposition, exposition. If you rely on that much exposition to get through a comic book movie, then I really worry, because it was so much voiceovers and trying to explain everything that didn't need to be explained 3 or 4 times. Like, and you were saying the moral at the end, it was reiterated like 4 or 5 times, and it's just like, why am I watching this?
Yeah, it's baffling to me because particularly I've pulled up the screenwriters here really quickly, and again, James Wan has been an auteur. He's been an otter in the.
He's an otter.
He's an otter in the. Somebody please make that as an image. That would be really funny. In the horror genre, and I'm not somebody who necessarily enjoys this franchise, that genre. You know this to be true. I have seen all of the Conjurings, and at least the continuity within those has been very well executed, as well as the Insidious franchise. He's one of the co-creators of Saw, and I'm very curious for him. Everything that I've liked that James Wan has done, none of those elements are in here. It's very interesting to me because Dave Sandenberg, who did Shazam, also cut his teeth in horror. And you get to see that balance played really effectively, particularly in Shazam. And then James Wan has worked through adversity before. I would be remiss without mentioning what he had to do with Furious 7 and the passing away of Paul Walker, and managing to make that a succinct film in the Fast and Furious franchise that retired a character respectfully and with grace, and then has I reviewed Fast X, so we don't need to trudge down that path. But it just feels like he was attached to the movie and he made whatever movie, and just the passion he has had behind other projects just does not seem to be present. Even in visuals, I know this film shot through the pandemic, but there was so much just bad green screen and environments that are so uninspired, where it's jungle, desert. Atlantis looks cool. I think the bioluminescence in the environment is really cool. I've liked that, and it actually feels like a place, unlike the Atlantis, or it's not called, or wherever Namor lives in Wakanda Forever, where it's just everything is, and I get it's more realistic and not, but bioluminescence is a thing that actually does exist in depths of the ocean because it has to, because of there's no sun down there. But it's I'm really disappointed in you could have so you and I have agreed on this. I think most people who watch the MCU critically would agree with this, that the best film the MCU ever made was Captain America and the Winter Soldier. And it's one of the only films to actually address like politics and have it done through a matured lens that the other films and franchises have just not they failed to meet that bar. And as I mentioned earlier, you could have this moral message wrapped around Aquaman. The fact that Jason Momoa in his real life is looking to create more reusable products, and the oceans are obviously, there's an issue with climate change. If you don't want politics in this podcast, then I guess this isn't the one for you, but not that what I don't care. But having a guy who is king of the oceans, again, this story just seems like we got one idea and didn't bother to come up with more.
Yeah, there's definitely a disconnect somewhere along the way, whether, and specifically in the writers' room, whether that came about because they said, you know what, the DCU is being taken apart and we'll restart, if everyone just threw their hands up and said, I don't care, or if they tried their hand at AI writing part of this. I don't know. But somewhere along the way, people just stopped sort of trying. There was a lot thrown out. Like, it's almost like James had like 4 movies planned and then they canceled them. So he just put it all in this, but only like for a minute each thing. Or if they gave someone else a shot to try to do some stuff. I don't know if someone was cutting their teeth to this or what it was, but it didn't make sense. It didn't come off like one of his films in any way, shape, or form. So, I'm confused.
What's baffling too, and we can wrap up non-spoilers and then get into specifics, is that I am by no means a fan of David Zaslav, who's currently running Warner, because of what they've chosen to not release. And even as somebody who liked The Flash, but The Flash costs like who knows how much, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it got pushed out. And then this film, which had no marketing, obviously the strike was happening, but then it's like, okay, make 3 TikToks and there's our, like, obviously they're not spending the marketing on the movies, but it just baffles me even more that what the DCEU had with Zack Snyder, and I'm not, again, I enjoyed his films more than a lot of the other ones. We've talked about that in the tier list ranking, but if we've had conversations about the pros and cons of all those films, but at least with the 3 he worked on, there was a succinct vision and tone. And as the DCEU continued, and it just seemed like, who will make a movie for us, that movies that would have had rewrites or potentially changes at the creative stages to prevent these things from getting made. It's ironic because, to compare it to the Marvel thing, and this has become sort of an issue, it's become an issue for Marvel as well, which was like Iron Man was being written as they were filming it, and then that became the way that they made their films, and it worked out to some degree, but then eventually they realized they needed scripts, and then they apparently forgot that for 5 years, because look at the Disney Plus television shows. But Batgirl got canceled or written off for tax purposes. And then I get Jason Momoa, Aquaman made $1 billion, but the confidence to put this out, I find absolutely baffling. And like, we had talked about this prior to going to see it. I wanted to like it, and you just gave me nothing. Like a substance, like I don't want to be just crapping on the movies in general, but like I like Jason Momoa as Aquaman. I think that's a really fun casting for a character who historically has absolutely been a joke. He really does fit in line with me with the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited version of that character, much more in the Arthurian lore myth, like King Arthur. He is King Arthur Curry of Atlantis, but this movie and The Flash and Black Adam are examples of the superhero fatigue where it's presented in, well, yeah, if you're going to give me like, and I'm sure everybody from the bottom up to some degree, maybe not writing and directing, but in terms of the key grips, everybody working on the set was doing everything that they could, because these things don't get made without everybody putting in all their effort. But at the creative stage, why were these decisions allowed to be the final ones? That's to me what's most baffling.
Yeah, and it goes back to like, did they just not care anymore? Like, are they just trying to get it out of the way and just release it? Like, I don't understand not shelving something like this or doing another pass through it. Like, it just seems like they just wanted to get it out of the way. That's all I can think of for it. But I mean, you and I have liked some terrible movies in the past, and we'll fully admit, they might not be the best movies, but they were fun, or you know what, they did certain things correct. This just didn't, and we wanted it to. We were hoping that this one would be the one that did that, and it just didn't.
Yeah, I think we can get into that into spoilers. So, I mean, if you want to go see Jason Momoa on the big screen again as this character for the final time, sure, you can go ahead. But even if you liked the first one a lot, you're not getting the same return, which is unfortunate. But I can kind of explain, and I don't want to get into this state of this didn't do this, so therefore it's bad. But I think because, as you said, did everything, which I'm going to get into, I think cutting a lot and simplifying this would have worked a lot better. So we're going to jump into spoilers, and I will explain.
Yeah. All right. Good job, little brother. High five.
So we're in spoilers for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. So we've done this before off the show in general. I guess for history buffs of the podcast, there was a version of Film Realist 5 years ago where Chris and I were on the show together. It was the golden age. It was before the pandemic. But then life gets
so
in the way.
naive.
I know I think what's hilarious is I think our first episode was solo.
Oh, was it?
I think it was.
Wow.
But then life gets in the way, and Chris godfathered me the name and whatnot. So as I always forget to do this now that Chris is here, the theme song for the podcast is from Chris's band, You Versus Me, and your music is still on Apple Music and Spotify. So
yes,
you can find it there. I love Raise the Dead. I think that's my favorite song you guys have.
Awesome.
It's awesome. And okay, so getting into the specifics, I said this just before we got into that, about simplicity being this movie's friend. I think you could have, I'm just going to say second draft, because who knows. And so we talked about, without getting into specifics, so he has, at the end of the film, I'm gonna state the ending and then backtrack into how I think you could have simplified this significantly to make the end goal matter. Okay, is that the world is getting hotter as a result of Black Manta using this ancient king's, what's his name? Create Kordax. So it's a deep cut DC piece of lore that I didn't even know. So this ancient energy source that created greenhouse gases and could have easily destroyed the world. And so Black Manta is using that because he is being possessed by the Black Trident to release this army so he can kill all of Atlantis. Okay. And so there was this element of global warming in the film, which I think is fine. Like I'm not a climate change denier. the fact that I only have like half an inch of snow and it's 2 days before Christmas, I hate it. I want to be playing in the snow with my kids. I don't like that that's the case. Obviously all the other things, hurricanes and tornadoes, obviously as a result of this suck. But I want to see if you're on the same page with me. We see that Arthur is having a very hard time as a king. I'm shocked that, and typically some of the best superhero stories are the villain is a negative reflection of me, right? Like opposite sides of the same coin. Where if in the writing stage, I think what they should have done was, okay, we want to have this message about unity and connection. And I think I like the fact that they have the element of Arthur butting heads with like the Parliament of Atlantis. I think that is a good thing to see. It's like
Sure.
he's struggling, right? He's the son of a lighthouse guy of Boba Fett. Right? Like, yeah, he comes from nobility, but it's not like he's been trained to be a king. And so I like that element where I think this should have been a much more personal story for Arthur, where he's struggling to be this king. And at the meantime, Black Manta is this other king who, regardless of evil, clearly had complete control over his army of Walking Dead zombies. And so you could have had a significant amount of comparisons to this while also talking about the devastation that true power gives. And you could have potentially actually had Arthur struggling with something, which he doesn't throughout the entire movie. There's never any moment of self-reflection. And the film tries it at the very end, but I think it's too late, where we should have had a turn of Orm much earlier. But and I get Black Manta is a big character. I don't want to diminish that character, but I've always enjoyed the brother relationship so much more in the Aquaman franchise. And if Orm had become the Kordax, the Black Triton King, because Kordax and Atlan were brothers, as George Lucas says, it's all about symmetry. It's all about poetry. And some people might argue that would be revisiting an element of the first film, but I think if you still want to get to the conclusion of them truly feeling like they are brothers for each other, having it in one scene at the ending isn't a good payoff. But if we spent half the film with Arthur struggling to want to save his brother because of his relationship with Nicole Kidman, I think it manages to get across everything the movie's trying to do but fails. What do you think?
So if they're not canceling this current DC universe, do you not see him taking on the Black Trident and them continuing this movie? That's the end of the movie right there. And then the third movie is the resolution of this, not a quick wrap up at the end there. See, I think that they glossed over too many things and they just wrapped it up. And you're exactly right. Like, why would you even touch on that if you're not going to utilize it properly? Right? It's such a huge moment, and they just sort of they wrap it up and get through it so quickly, and it doesn't make sense, because that is amazing. That leads itself to a third movie that's incredible. Him against his brother again, his brother possessed. How do you get through these armies? What's happening to the world? But it comes down to the exact same thing you're talking about: simplicity, right? If you just break it down to that, a king frees his brother to try to save the realm. The brother turns evil. Great, there you go. All right, and then you're trying to save and family for the next one, whatever. But a struggling king who struggles for half a minute, but then seems to figure it all out, but says that he's struggling, but has it all figured out, and then decides to do stuff without even consulting the rest of them, as though he's not struggling. Like, it didn't make any sense to just go that way, right? So if you're going to throw it away, fine. But like, I feel like they're almost lying to us. Like, don't pretend that this is the movie that you wanted to make and everything like that. Tell us, like, no, this isn't what we wanted. Unfortunately, this is what we're stuck with, though, you know?
Well, and speaking of not wanting it to be the movie that they wanted to make, so Amber Heard does have a fair amount of scenes with Jason Momoa.
Yep.
There have been rumors that they necessarily didn't have the best chemistry as a result of real world events, but I'm happy to say that at no point did I feel that their chemistry from the previous films was any way affected in this. I like the fact that because Mara is this independent hydrokinetic like powerhouse, and specifically other versions of her where she actually trains like other Atlanteans to be soldiers for the armies and whatnot. I think they definitely um they don't fridge her. She gets significantly injured and then comes back for the climax. But again, James Wan saying like he's always wanted this to be the brother story. To me, that rings especially hollow in that we don't get enough conflict between them.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. And
Like
did you not feel that Amber Heard was missing for the first like 15 minutes of that movie though? Like it was
the first 15,
Arthur and his
yes.
baby. It was
Yeah.
just Arthur and his baby. And for the first like 15, 20 minutes, I thought, oh, they did cut her out of this movie.
Mhm.
And then she comes in hard. So it just felt like they tried to at the beginning, but then they were like, oh, we've got a lot of fight scenes with her. We have to bring her back in.
Well, and
Like
this movie,
I found it weird.
and this movie also has 3 non-death scenes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, like it's this was a prediction I never actually put out because I was thinking specifically to an episode of Justice League where as a result of Orm, Aquaman or Arthur has to cut his hand off to save his son. And the baby doesn't really play into the story. It's like a early 2000s sitcom where, oh right, we have the baby comes up at the end. But again, I going back and again, I have never, I mean, I've written one script. It was for Space Jam 2.
I've read
and
it. It's great.
Thank you. But this being everything, I think in the state of when this was produced, even if you don't think you're getting a third one, it is one of the things, and I don't want to be constantly going back and forth this, but in the heyday of the MCU, I think most people, even as a fan, myself included, was Kevin Feige said, whatever your best idea is, you should use it. Don't save it for later. And having the brothers go back and forth and it being something it doesn't have to be what I said, but having, if the relationship between the two brothers is important to you as it's presented somewhat in the movie, then that should have been the focus. And it's not. And for that, you get this. And I like Black Manta. I like Yaya as that character. I think he was cast really well. The guy looks awesome in the costume is incredible. I like that, especially, but Orm or Arthur's Joker, his nemesis is Orm. Black Manta he's done some stuff, but if you're going to have both of them, you should ultimately have some conflict and resolution with Orm. At the very end, him being like, well, you died. And we had the one scene where we were battling for the trident. Like everything it's quick. It's very minuscule in terms of the stakes because we had a factory that was killing the planet. Well, that's gone. Oh, we've got this massive army to deal with. Well, we've got 4 people. We've got Ivan Drago, Gimli from Lord of the Rings, and we've got Mara and Randall Park. What was his name in Ant-Man? What was his name was Jimmy Woo. Right? Like that's it. John Rhys Davies, very funny. I liked him as the big crab guy. Dolph Lundgren being in this is fun. I liked his character from the previous one. But yeah, it's pun intended for this. The film throws everything at you, but there's no depth.
Now, could you reverse Justice League this? Could you cut this down and make it a better film?
No, I don't think so because of how
not
little
enough
is there. Right? Like
fair enough.
If the film was like 3 hours long, I think you and I could go, okay, we can kind of cut out all the Black Manta stuff and just make it Orm and Arthur. But we get so much David Kane stuff, which I think is Black Manta. Yeah, David Kane. Black Manta stuff that it's not there's too much and too much happening. It's everything is happening, but it's all surface level stuff. Yeah. That's the problem.
It'd be interesting to see what they did film for this whole thing, because if that's all they filmed, then there's nothing there. If there's more on the cutting room floor, then absolutely you can get something else out of this. But
I
like,
would be curious to see if like if there's 20 more minutes, does that make a difference? Like typically one for if the movie was longer, I'd like to see the longer version cuz then I can on my own
it
be like,
depends.
okay.
It depends what makes it longer, right? Because
Yeah.
the whole end of this movie, you're literally watching and saying, "Oh, well, Black Panther already did this, and they did it much better. So why are you even trying? Why are you going this route? You
Mhm.
already have DC being compared to the MCU. So the last thing you want to do is do a direct comparison and be able to allow people to put the two next to each other and be like, this was not done as good as this one."
Mhm.
Right, with a nation coming out to the world and blah 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 blah. Like
I hadn't
it's
even thought of that yet, but yeah, that's true. They did that 5 years ago.
yeah.
Yeah, it's and I get it's ugh, it's nothing. I like I've it's not so bad it's good, which is again disappointing cuz even sometimes those are fun to explore. I
That's what
was
we were
joking
hoping
with you.
for.
I was joking with you before we saw this like we wanted Morbius to be that and it wasn't. Although seeing the trailer on the big screen for Madam Web, I think we might be ready there
Uh,
might be one coming up. So, we will see that in the near future. I that will do it for spoilers for Ant-Man,
Ant-Man.
Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. It's fine. It's not fine. It's a movie. It
Yeah.
does what it wants. Um all right. So yeah, so to wrap up, this wraps up the 2023. I know I said this on the last episode, but 2023 was a huge year for the podcast. There was substantial growth in the listener base, a lot more interactivity from the listeners, specifically on Spotify, which I really appreciate. Makes it fun for me. Shows me that people are listening. I on so you wouldn't have heard this on the Wonka episode because I had already recorded Rebel Moon with Steven ahead of time. So, Chris, you can also answer these questions because these were part of the most recent episodes. So, on the Wonka episode, my question of the week was what is, I just realized I wrote this wrong, but that doesn't matter. What is you favorite kind of chocolate? Dark, milk, or white? Just out of curiosity. Scotty Cameron, you are awesome. You typically respond. I think you've responded to everything in the last 4 months, which is awesome. Thank you, Scotty Cameron. Scotty said dairy free dark chocolate because I have a dairy allergy. Well, I'm glad you have found chocolate that you like that allows you to eat it. Stephanie said milk chocolate, but with toffee or almonds in it. So not a pure chocolate, but that's okay. Chris, what is your favorite kind of chocolate?
I like the chocolate with the center that kind of melts, the Lindor stuff. I
I
don't
those
really
things
care
are so
what
good.
type,
Yeah.
right? Like as long as it's got that, it's like a bonus. I just love it so much. Give me the white, give me the milk, give me the dark. I'm good.
Yeah, it's true. I like all of the Lindor ones. And then on the Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire review with Stephen Colbert, the question was simple. What is your favorite Zack Snyder film? Scotty Cameron responded with Watchmen and Zack Snyder's Justice League. I'm curious, Chris, because I don't think I know this answer. What is your favorite Zack Snyder film?
My favorite Zack
Yeah,
Snyder film, Watchmen.
Watchmen. I think Watchmen gets better with time.
It's aged actually really well, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But I love that's all I'm gonna say. I know people don't really like that his cut that much, but I enjoy it.
If you haven't seen it, and Zach has even said this, I think it's fun to watch the ultimate cut, which includes the Black Freighter animated elements in it. But the director's cut, I think, is the best version you were going to get of the actual graphic novel. Of course, the
Yeah,
television series was absolutely incredible, but from this actual graphic novel, I think it's the best you're going to get from that. I think mine's Batman versus Superman, the
I
ultimate
mean, no
edition.
surprise. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
all right. And so I'm going to speed through this really quickly, as I said I was going to. So from top down in S ranking, I have Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman Ultimate Edition. In A, I have Wonder Woman, Shazam, Zack Snyder's Justice League. In B, I have Birds of Prey, The Suicide Squad, Blue Beetle. In C, I have Aquaman, Peacemaker, and The Flash. In D, I have Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman 84, Black Adam, Shazam Fury of the Gods, and Justice League. And Aquaman and Lost Kingdom, unfortunately, it gets an F. it's a lot of stuff, but ultimately leads to nothing, which is unfortunate. If I'm gonna, it's a Google slide, so I can't share my actual tier maker for this, but I might construct one on tier maker so you can make your own and share them with the podcast. The podcast is on all the social medias. They're all linked in the link tree, so you can look for them there for any version of interaction. I respond to all my direct messages, and it's the best way of finding out what's coming out with the podcast. The first episode of the new year will be my top 10 of 2023. I wanted to get that done for this week, but unfortunately, I didn't have time. There are a couple other films that I haven't had a chance to see yet. I can let you know. Maestro, I haven't had a chance to watch yet. Jermaine, I will be watching The Killer. And I also want to see the musical remake of The Color Purple to wrap up the year, so I can do that. I have seen Iron Claw, but because I was able to get Chris on the podcast, this was going to be a long enough episode. So if it has not had a reviewed episode, there will be a mini review if it's included in the top 10, or even if it's not. So you can look forward to that. There will be an episode on January 1st. So there will be a New Year's Day episode to look forward to. But as said, this is releasing on Christmas Day. So if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. If you don't, Happy Holidays. I hope the rest of your 2023 is great, and I look forward to seeing you in the new year. Chris, thank you for taking the limited time you have while your kids are sleeping.
Thanks for having me out. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everyone.
This has been The Film Realist. I'm Kyle Naranya. See you.